Cool. Give me one of these.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Content Marketing Takedowns. Today, we're going to talk about the HR software solution provider Gusto. So Gusto, recently came across them and actually was pretty impressed overall with their content marketing strategy. So not as much to take down in this episode, but I think a lot of good stuff overall that we can use and leverage for our own strategy. So first, worth noting, they are, I said provider, but they're a software company basically offering a full service, it looks like, solution for an HR type solution. So that leans into their content marketing strategy specifically. And they're actually doing pretty well from a search standpoint as a whole. They've seen some good growth, and it's worth noting that as we kind of look into their strategy. So when you go into the blog section, one thing that I think in particular stands out when you dig into the kind of content and work that they do is just their overall nav setup. It does follow you, but one thing I like about it is just the minimalistic feel of it while still achieving goals. So there are those main areas of an HR person that they might want to be solving for. They want to hire, they want to grow, they want to manage their team, they want to retain them. What is the math side of that as a HR provider? Those things are the core areas that you might want to dig into as is someone who's trying to solve for those main core buckets. So one things we've talked about in the past and I've shared on Twitter and things like that are the idea of a library, not a blog, that is more common today. And although they have a more uniform blog structure on Gusto, I do like what they do in terms of this HR kind of setup in terms of organizing around these concepts. You can see they actually do organize slightly by that concept of the library, where it's not just the newest to oldest, but actual relevant topics that people find interesting around those core areas as well. And another thing I just generally like about Gusto and their setup is they are solving for the main content strategy and content types that they know are common in their business. They've actually built page layout types to match to that intent. And what they've realized here is if you look at these different setups, the Q&A format is actually something they get a lot. It's like, do I form an LLC in California? They actually create a question type setup that solves for that. So one of the things that I think is really interesting and well done by them, and we've seen it on Policy Genius as well, is they will actually front load that question. It's almost like a forum in that capacity where someone's asking a question. As an SEO, it's very common for many of us to actually write a title like this that makes no sense for actual blog post title. But when you put that Q in front, it actually makes sense from a conversational point of view to align those things in a way that makes sense. Google's getting smarter about this generally, but I do like how they solve for that with their overall layout with the way that they do this and the overall structure. Generally, I prefer a blog that actually shares the main shopping experience, such as this, for best practice in terms of pushing to their main benefit software, payroll software, and things like that. They don't retain that on their blog, which I think is a slight missed opportunity in terms of solving for SEO in that way. They do have this more section, which you can find some of those things, which might be their way of solving for that. It's hard to say exactly how Google solves for that and actually values that kind of thing, but it's probably they probably do value that. It's not hidden. And if I'm Google, I'm probably struggling, even though I doubt users are actually using that kind of thing in that top right corner. So as we keep going in general, one other thing I like about their section on the main blog index is how they again solve for that common content type against their blog layout and solve for it rather than just saying, hey, we need a blog, newest to oldest. They're actually thinking deliberately through, these are the most common query types or content types we're going to have. So let's build a format against that to make us be more remarkable and stand out in the marketplace, which so few people do. And it's subtle, but they do two things. They have this question and answer section on their blog index, and they also have this call to action. Ask Gusto, get answers. That's a pretty cool way of kind of pushing people to actually use their search function. Some people will use this, but I don't think people will be drawn to do that as compared to this kind of setup where I'm actually compelled based on their language that they leverage there. They also give specific answers and examples of those answers that people might answer or ask them. And they also have a specific section entirely around Ask Gusto that also ties to those question formats that are very frequent in HR because there are some complex questions that people want answers to when they're going to a site like this. And it's also good for internal linking as well. And you can see how they're kind of solving for that overall with the kind of things that they do. Another thing on the negative side, although they have this question and answer setup, I don't think they're always solving for quick answer best practice with these layouts from the answer standpoint, anyways. So if you see, I've always seen this be the case. If you have a question or a format, Google's trying to extract the answer in a way that they're really confident about. So to do that, you actually have to structure it. If I'm a robot, how would I pull that information out and be confident that is the answer? So in this instance, you would want to structure the answer immediately in a way that says, you can run an employment background check by, or there's definitions as well, like what is an LLC? You would say an LLC is in that first sentence. And you can see they actually instead go into a kind of story. It's a disconnect. If you're trying to get into a quick answer, if Google's trying to find that simple answer to their question, how do I run employment background check? They can't confidently find it here. So Gusto, on average, is not really quickly giving the answer to the questions that they lay out in this Q&A format. I think it's a good reason why they don't always rank amazingly for these things. And they're probably going to actually show me up here and not do that. You can see they actually don't have the quick answer. In this example, it is ZipRecruiter instead. And it's just a more simple way of doing that. And you can see this is how they've solved for it. They've solved for structure, and even though it's further down on the page, it's a how-to, and then they give quick answers of choose, select, run. Something I've commonly seen with these how-to type queries, even if it is a question, is what you'll actually be seeing is a verb with each step. It's go, run, select. Those kind of like directional things are actually how people would do something versus being more verbose or fluffy with the language in those steps. And you can see how that might be helping ZipRecruiter in this section. So another thing, unfortunately, at certain browser sizes for Gusto, I noticed it's not always an elegant solution. I just resize easily here, and you can see that their call to action on the right is kind of sticking to the bottom. Hopefully something that's just in progress, and maybe by the time you watch this, this will be fixed. But I can tell at certain breakpoints, they haven't really solved for that. So it's really a matter of doing a lot of mobile testing, looking at laptop sizes, other common sizes when you're testing things like this, where you can create a not amazing experience with the content that you're doing. That said, other things I do like about this, I think it is subtle and not too in your face how they do that call to action when it is further up on the page in a more natural location. It's not in your face, but it's elegant, it's well done. It's not right at the top. It's a well executed version of that concept. And on some pages, another thing I've seen, and I don't see it on this example, is they also have some calls to action mid-content. So this is a good example here. And I think it's a perfect way of thinking about our own call to actions for whatever our sites are, whether it's software or e-commerce, things like that. In general, I think 3/4 of the way down, a subtle call to action, whether it's a button, we've seen this with an REI example, which we can show, or in this example, just a full width call to action that is elegant, done, even though it is full width. It doesn't feel aggressive based on how it's structured. And I think that's smart by them to basically solve for answering these queries and then pushing them to an actual solution that allows them to monetize in a way that makes sense versus just being above the fold and annoying. So another thing I liked on Gusto is on some of their titles, they're actually using, again, a clever but not too aggressive title format. In here, you can tell with this title in particular, it's drawing intrigue. Something we've recently seen in the SEO world is that questions do drive click-through rate on average, even if it's not a question. So this isn't a question, but it's kind of that same idea as like, what is the answer to the way this title is phrased? And it's not to the upworthy old school level of saying you'll never imagine what happens next, but it is a intrigue moment where you're trying to find that answer. And I think that's well done by Gusto in this title, and they do it in other ones as well. Then a final point on this kind of blog setup. Overall, I mean, I do like how it's scannable. They have nice different call outs. I think a smart blog strategy, an effective one, is exactly like they have it laid out here. It's not just we have text, we haven't really thought through what a H2 looks like, what a table looks like, what a block quote looks like. The most effective, efficient content marketing companies have setups where this is the case. And what also makes them effective is they need less images on average. They do have some images here, but it's not overly time intensive for them to design a lot of these. And I think that probably helps them establish scale with their approach when they're doing these things. And at the final part, something that stood out with me with Gusto is I think on most people's websites, you'll see a related linking setup that is sometimes 3 to 6, if not more. And we get that as SEOs, and we have to say, we need to get related linking to these important SEO pages, or we're just not going to see SEO results. But what stood out about Gusto is the lack of choice actually could draw someone to read something. I think what we do as SEOs is we point to so many pages, we point to nothing because of that. What they do instead is they have a very narrowly focused, clean looking related linking area that is topically relevant to the page they're on. And I think that makes it more likely. They give 2 different options, but they're also look nice, they draw your eye. And because of those 2 setups versus 7, I think it actually looks good and is going to be effective for actually getting someone to read another article. So it might be 1 step back and then 5 steps forward in terms of time on site, engagement, things like that. And maybe this is the reason Gusto is doing so well is they've decided, hey, we're not going to link to 19 articles like every single buddy else. We're actually going to do something different and actually get the time on site that we need to build a brand impression that will actually get someone to sign up for the software. You can see they also do push to other articles as well, so that's an extra option. Also, if you're just in the finance area of this HR solution, you can dig in to see all articles and then still get that. It's also a good SEO benefit as well. It's another related link to an area where it's hosted. It's like a mini HTML sitemap. That's a benefit for them and what they're doing. Although Gusto has an overall strong blog strategy, you can tell actually if you dig into Ahrefs and other areas that not all of their articles are performing super swimmingly. I think that it has to do with a lack of optimization and not aligning to what Google wants very often. And they're still relatively early in the strategy. I can tell in terms of published dates and things like that. So I expected it to improve over time. You can see the total raw numbers are not amazing. And they have over 1,000 pages indexed by Google. And you can see a similar number here in Ahrefs as well. And what I think contributes to that are there are a lot of pages not performing that great in the search results. So they might want to dig into that, do a content audit. My general process is to see what kind of articles are getting less than say 100 visits a month or have no links, and ask ourselves, should we kill those? Or in their situation, it almost seems like they are thinking about search and real things people would want to solve for, and just update them and create a better experience for that overall. Other things I noticed on some of these is Gusto will have a date up top and then create an updated section at the bottom with a different timestamp. It's kind of strange. This is actually way more recent than the top level. I would instead put the right setup up here so it doesn't jar users. You have the updated date up there. I do like the structure of just saying updated August 18th, 2019 versus the old date. It gives people context that this wasn't published fresh today, but still relevant, and also does it in a minimalistic fashion overall. And that could contribute to some issues for them also in terms of some disconnect on timestamps. Their articles on average might be not as competitive on some of these search results and cause them some issues. But I am seeing that they're updating some of these, and that is likely helping them overall when they're trying to rank. So a final thing on their layout, I see comments on business blogs more and more, not more and more, but I see them, but I think they're almost pretty dead. Like they were already ineffective. I think if you're great at setting up the user experience to be low friction, you can get some. But most people comment on social these days. If you share something on Twitter, on LinkedIn, they're not going to go to the blog to continue that conversation. They're going to continue that conversation on social. So in some ways, this just becomes a depressing section. I spent 30 minutes looking through the Gusto blog, almost an hour. I don't think I really saw any comments, even though they're doing a pretty good job in terms of the layout and setup that makes them look the way they are. So as a final point, as you go to Gusto and you look at actually their mobile setup, Although I like the subtlety of their calls to action, I don't love what they do on mobile in terms of an aggressive above the fold call to action that follows you. On a mobile phone, on my iPhone, I think this takes up too much real estate and can be invasive to creating an optimal experience. I do think maybe a bottom, more thin call to action can be effective here. And maybe this is effective for them. This is just my instinct reaction without looking at data, but it feels a little too invasive. And I wouldn't suggest being this in your face overall as Gusto is. But that said, I like Gusto. I mean, I like a lot of what they're doing. I think as at a macro level, how to describe their strategies, it seems like they have a great UX designer that has really thought through that. They have a content strategist that's really smart. It does feel like they're thinking about SEO generally. I don't see a lot of active link building being done. It seems like a lot of brand awareness and podcast type sponsorship work that's actually powering a lot of their rankings. And just general quality of this blog, I think, is helpful. I think they're growing because of the overall effectiveness and quality of some of these things, but they could do better. They could do better. They're not amazing. No one's perfect. People would say the same probably about our approach, but overall, cheers to Gusto. I think they're way above average from what I look at. I'd give them an overall a B plus grade for a content marketing strategy. They can get to A, but overall, I think they're going to continue growing if they stay on the path they are. So thanks for watching. Love to hear your thoughts on Gusto and the series. Please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and let us know what you thought.